Happy Hobbit Day to everyone. Fall is here and it's time to bake some tasty treats. Last year for Hobbit Day, I made lembas bread 4 different ways, but this year we're going to be making Beorn's twice-baked honey cakes. Beorn is a shape-shifting werebear who talks to animals and keeps bees. He's a vegetarian who gives off strong libertarian vibes, a very off-grid, alternative lifestyle type of guy. He supplies Bilbo and company with twice-baked cakes when they resume their journey to the Misty Mountains. So today we're going to be making some cakes fit for a hobbit's journey. These cakes are twice-baked, which means that they're going to be drier than a typical cake or cookie. This is what makes them great for taking them on long journeys without them spoiling. When I was deciding what kind of recipe I wanted to use for this project, it hit me. Biscotti is also a twice-baked sweet treat. So I found a recipe for Honey Biscotti that I made a few alterations to. You can find the link to this recipe in the description below. So I got to work mixing up my first batch of dough. I mixed together a 1/4 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of honey, 2 eggs, 1/2 teaspoon vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon of orange flower water, 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda. I substituted 1 teaspoon cinnamon for 1 teaspoon nutmeg. Hot take, I don't actually enjoy cinnamon that much. It's fine, but I vastly prefer nutmeg. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I omitted the orange zest because I didn't want the orange zest to overpower the honey flavor that we're going for, and I omitted the pistachios as well. I spread the dough into a large rectangle on a sheet tray. Then I put it in the oven at 350 for about 15 minutes for the first bake. After the first bake, I let the cake cool down to room temperature before cutting it into little 3 by 3 inch cakes. Then they went back in the oven for the second bake. The goal of the second bake is to dry out the cakes, not to overbake or burn them. And then I had my first batch of honey cakes. Now here's where things started to fall apart a little bit. I wanted to decorate these cakes with some sort of bee motif. I've been watching a lot of From the Mind of Christine McConnell videos, and I got it in my head that I was capable of sculpting little bees out of fondant and using hazelnuts for their bodies. I don't have sculpting tools or even sculpting experience. I didn't even have any fondant in the house. So I started by making my own fondant. No recipe or anything. I thought I knew what I was doing. I had this meringue powder that I mixed with some water. I added some powdered sugar until it became the consistency of royal icing. Then I just kept adding powdered sugar until I had a dough. I also added some food coloring to turn it yellow, and there it was. I had created fondant. And then I started shaping it. I made these little bee heads, little balls, and then I tried to make the little bee antennae, but the fondant was drying and hardening really fast while I was trying to manipulate it. So the little things that I was making started breaking apart. Then I tried to roll the fondant out and cut shapes into it with cookie cutters, but I wasn't making anything that looked like a bee. I had failed. The next day, I returned to the project with renewed hope and vigor. I decided to try something different. My new idea was to make a stencil of a bee out of parchment paper and sprinkle ground hazelnuts over the stencil to leave the shape of a bee on the cake. So I began by making a second batch of dough. This time I left out the orange blossom water because I don't think you could really taste it in the first batch. I love orange blossom water, but it never translates into baked goods in the way that I want it to. I highly recommend putting the smallest amount in your iced coffee sometime. I added almond extract instead of the orange blossom water. Hot take, almond extract might be better than vanilla extract. I ground up some hazelnuts and toasted them in the oven, and I made little bee stencils out of parchment paper. It was time to see if I could pull this idea off. And it was another fail. The dough was so sticky, more sticky than regular batter because of all the honey in the dough. So the parchment paper got stuck and I was barely able to achieve the impression of a B shape. So I just sprinkled hazelnuts evenly over the top and baked it just like I baked the first batch.
All right, I'm gonna try version number 1. That's very nice. I expected it to be more like a crouton, which I was kind of skeptical about, but it's very dry but still soft and kind of pillowy, which I very much like. The sweetness is very round, which I think comes from the honey. You can obviously taste the nutmeg that you put in it. I don't taste any of the orange blossom water. I'll try and contrast the second version. You taste the nuts, not just in terms of it being a hazelnut, but like the toastiness of it, which adds a nice flavor to it. Texturally, I don't think the nuts add as much. I'm, in general, not the biggest fan of nuts in baked goods, mainly as a texture thing, not necessarily as a flavor thing. I actually like the first one better. In my opinion, I think the almond gets in the way, if that's what the difference is, the almond gets in the way of the honey. Yeah, pulling this out of the bottom of my backpack after a long day of hiking would be fantastic.
The end result was definitely tasty. At the very least, I've made a great treat to go with my afternoon tea. Please leave me a comment and let me know what fantasy dish you'd like to see me make. The more impossible, the better. Like and subscribe for more, and I hope you have a happy Hobbit day.